So I'm going to jump over now to the personal experience that Tamara and I had with this, and which was quite remarkable. You know, Mark Twain said that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And this is certainly what happened. A shocking synchronicity that occurred around this book. So, just to say a little bit about myself, I was the child of war refugees. My parents were atheists. I was an only child. They were extreme skeptics about anything spiritual or religious, and they instilled in me a strong reflex about it. Had a very difficult childhood because they were both sick and in and out of the hospital, plus they were demented from their war experiences, but wouldn't get any help. And they didn't trust Americans, which was really weird, even though they came to America. And so I wasn't really allowed to be socialized. I actually spoke with an accent when I started first grade, even though I was born and raised in Los Angeles. And since we lived in kind of a barrio neighborhood, I got beat up constantly. By the time, unfortunately for me, I was intelligent and I got lifted up a grade. And so not only was I a runt, I was born prematurely, but then I was also ahead of myself in school, which made me a target. And as I got to become a teenager, I suddenly realized that I didn't feel that I had a social contract. Between school and my family and my experience of life, I just thought I didn't know anybody, including life, anything. And as a result, I became a force for destructiveness. I became devoted to lying. I was a racist. I was a nihilist. I was a thief. I was violent. I formed a band when I was 17 that enshrined all of those terrible principles, and I became quite popular. I had two biker gangs that loved me and our music and would come to all our shows, and people who would do violence on my behalf. And I was definitely headed for a bad ending. As my future wife Tamara said, she said that it was less a band than an invitation to a second Altamont. And one day I was at this kind of scummy club, and I was there trying to find our guitar player who had wised up and realized that he wanted to make money and have girlfriends, and he wasn't going to get that with my crazy self in charge of the band. And my drummer, who was as crazy as I was and was also a very violent person, and I had gone down there to try to force him back into the band. Well, I saw this blonde girl who just looked like she didn't belong there. She wasn't dressed right. Her whole demeanor was wrong. She had this big smile on her face and these beautiful blue eyes that were so unpunk. And she got in a bad situation due to a friend of hers, where a whole band of people who'd just driven into town basically became fixated on her. And as somebody who had experienced violence and who had had a pretty rough and abusive childhood, she understood what was happening, and they understood that she was a victim and that victims freeze and that they had an opportunity to take advantage of her. And she didn't know how to get to safety. She had no way to get home. And so the guy who ran the club saw her looking at me, and he came over to her and he said, "You look like a nice girl. Do not talk to that guy. That guy is bad news." But at 2 a.m., as the club closed, I was standing outside in the rain on April 1st, April Fool's Day. I was smoking a black Russian cigarette, and I was dressed all in black. She said I looked like an anime villain. And she didn't know what to do. So she walked up to me, and I was shocked. This girl walks up and she says to me, "I'm in trouble. Please help me." I mean, I couldn't understand how that had happened. Like, that was like walking up to the devil and asking for help, you know? And, but something, it touched me, and something chivalrous woke up in me. And so I decided to help her. And I went back with her, and so did these guys, and they tried to do something. And myself and my drummer, even though it was 5-2, we scared them off. And she was still afraid to be left alone, so she came back to my place, and I gave her a pillow and a blanket to sleep on the floor, so I wasn't going to hit on her. She had spent the whole evening telling me about her boyfriend that she'd been with for 3 years in high school, and how he got a great job in the studios and had just bought a house when he was 19. And I just knew what she was saying to me was, I'm not this kind of girl, that I slipped into this bad situation. So I just wanted her to go ahead and have her life. But she, fortunately for me, at dawn, she came into my bed, and it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was love, even though I didn't recognize it. She did. She went home and told her brother that she just met the love of her life. And it took me 2 weeks to get it. I suddenly realized, I had this whole operation going. I had different girls on different nights, and they would bring me food and drugs and liquor and money, and that's how I was surviving. So I didn't want to fall in love. But I quickly reached a point where I couldn't stand to be with anybody, not just other girls, but even my own band. I wanted to be with her. And so I asked her to move in with me, and in my shock, she agreed to move in, and my life changed completely because she was an ethical, loving, just beautiful human being. And I kind of thought, I thought the world was a horrible place, but if a world could make a Tamara, then it can't be all bad. And that's how our adventure began. We lived a very magical life. We were infatuated with each other all our lives up to the very end. We were just like falling in love with each other all the time. And we had all kinds of adventures, beginning with 7 years that I spent as Manly Hall's research assistant. And she was she was his screener along with me. And we were good friends with the Halls. And that was the other thing that completely changed my life, because he saw in me an intellect that I didn't know I had. And so those 7 years with him made me fall in love with culture and religion and spirituality. And I've never lost the enthusiasm that he modeled for me. And same thing for her. We were always just thrilled to learn new things the way that he had been. And then when he sent us away, because he could see that the time was getting short for him and there would be a battle over the considerable assets for his Philosophical Research Society, he sent me off to become a musician. And she, watching me go through a bunch of terrible musicians, said, if those morons can play guitar, this moron can play guitar. And she became my guitarist, and I learned how to play guitar with her. And she turned out to be the leader of the band, this girl who'd been so quiet and would never speak in public and was very insecure, became this incredible presence of creativity and leadership who uplifted so many people, especially young women who she helped overcome trauma and believed in their talent. And she mentored filmmakers and musicians and poets, and it's just beautiful. So we lived a really lovely life together, and then we wrote several books together and separately. And then the last one that we wrote together was The Unobstructed Way. And Tamara had an experience about 10 years before that where she saw a vision of Stewart and Betty toasting her with champagne glasses. And we both wondered what did that mean? It just seemed strange. But it made sense after what happened, that I'm about to tell you happened. So after 40 years of never seeing a doctor, just being as healthy as could be, suddenly Tamara became ill one day. It was right after we finished the book, the same thing as Betty. And Tamara was very similar to Betty. She had Betty's way with animals, incredible rapport with animals. She had Betty's way with plants. Tamara, as I was saying earlier in a chat before we started this, she couldn't just feed hummingbirds. If she put out one hummingbird feeder, she'd wind up with 200 hummingbirds. If she had a pair of nutmeg mannequins in the garden and gave them seeds, she'd wind up with a whole flock of nutmeg mannequins. Like nature just flourished around her. And I think it was because she treated a plant and an animal as an equal with love, and she believed that the consciousness in them deserved as much respect as any human being. And like Betty, Tamara was also someone who lived life with zest and with an incredible sense of humor and resilience, who was the kind of person that, people who delivered food from the local Thai restaurant and who were going back to Thailand would come over just to say, I just wanted to see you one more time and say thank you so much for being so kind, and I'll always remember your generosity and your smile. And she just was this light in the world. Well, we finished the book, and then just like that, she gets ill. She declines for 5 days in our house, and then I find her unresponsive, and 5 days in the hospital, and then gone. So needless to say, I was devastated. I'd spent every day 46 years with her, loving her and worshiping her, really. I mean, just adoration. And I didn't know how I was going to go on. I mean, everything I did was wrapped up in her, and all my joy in life was her. And I'd learned to enjoy life because of her. And so I felt a sense of real horror after the first week that she was gone, because I knew I was going to have to start dealing with the details of death, cremation and death certificates and such, lawyers and accountants. And I didn't know where I was going to get the ability to do that. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was just grief-stricken. Well, on Monday morning at dawn, I suddenly remembered the appreciation meditation. And so I lay in bed and I started talking out loud and just telling Tamara all the things that I love so much about her, and going over the amazing adventures that we had. And then I had this liminal experience that was life-changing. I can only describe it as a soul fusion. It was like all the details of reality disappeared and there was just nothing but light. I got little glimpses of her hair, of her shoulder, which I now wonder if it was really my own memory, like I was furnishing those because her soul presence was there. I was so used to those things. And so it felt like she got on top of me, and we fused souls. That's the only way I can describe it. And it went on for quite a while. And when I woke up from it, I felt this incredible joy. And she had somehow wordlessly transmitted to me her perspective, which was that things like death certificates and cremation were trivialities. They were just the leftovers in the obstructed universe, and that her living soul was there with me, and that was what was important. So it helped me to deal with those things. But we weren't done yet. I started to get messages from people, mostly people who prayed for her. It was amazing. People all over the world who had been touched by her were praying for her when she was sick and then when she passed. There were Tibetan rituals. There was a ritual at Glastonbury. There was, it was really moving. Thousands of testimonials and on social media. And she started appearing to people. And people had never met her in real life. And they would start writing me these notes and saying, I just saw Tamara, or I dreamed about Tamara. There were literal apparitions of her to people. There were audio apparitions. There were dreams where she delivered specific messages. There was lots of omens, especially involving scarab beetles. She was very into Egypt. Dragonflies, butterflies, birds, especially cats. She was really into cats. And they started inundating me with messages. Sometimes I would get, for example, 3 different people who didn't know each other and never met us would tell me the same message from her on the same day. And the message was always very well timed to my need at that moment. So that was mind-blowing for me. Even though I had had some experiences of my own before that, I still had that skeptical reflex to deal with. And now here I was getting these things that shouldn't be happening, that my sense of reality didn't include. And then it got really dramatic because I was still missing her. I still do. I mean, what she put in this house was just made it a joyful place, and now it's very silent, and my life is very empty, even though I do lots of things, and I'm trying to mentor people as she did and such. But with her being absent, it feels like the sun went out and it's a gloomy day every day. And immediately after she passed, that was very strong, and I was very upset. And one day I was just so desperate. I felt ashamed, kind of, especially thinking of Stewart. But I said out loud, please, Tamara, show me something. Show me some kind of a sign. So Tamara had this 3.5-foot tall plastic fan, and she would keep this thing on all the time, day and night. If it was a hot day, she had it on to cool down. If it was a cold day, the heater was stuffy, so she'd have it on. She had it on if she was cooking. And I had read a review about this fan that said it was a fire hazard. So I believe that every man and woman has within us a Hausfrau, and that the right circumstance can bring out the Hausfrau. And this fan was the circumstance that brought out my Hausfrau. So I started to nag her about this fan. And when she'd leave the room, I would turn it off, and then she'd come back and defiantly turn it on. She'd come to bed, and I'd say, did you turn off the fan? She got tired of it, and she gave me a nickname that she never said to anybody but me. She would say, okay, Mildred. And sometimes she would also say that about herself. She would say, oh my God, I've gotten totally Mildred about this. So I asked her for a sign. And one of the 2 cats that she had picked out just before she passed, these kittens, one of them was strongly bonded to her and would only respond to her when called, no one else. After I asked to be shown a sign, about 20 minutes later, this cat perked up her ears and got all stiff and then ran into the kitchen to this chair that Tamara used to sit in all the time. And I thought, well, that's odd. And I wondered if that was the sign. But then the fan turned on by itself. So I went over there and I checked. Does it have a timer? Could the cat have accidentally turned it on? Is the plug loose? No. The thing turned on by itself. Of course, my skeptical reflex was still there. I still thought, well, maybe it's short-circuited. They said the fan was dangerous. And yet I also felt like, boy, is that Tamara's sense of humor. Like, of all the things she could have done to show her presence, she turned on the fan of contention. Next day, I was upstairs talking to a friend of mine who's into the Whites, and I told him about it, and he said, that's Tamara, no doubt about it. I mean, that's her sense of humor. I went downstairs, the fan was on. This happened 9 times. Every single time it happened when I told somebody the story. It never happened randomly. It always happened in reaction to putting a exclamation point on the story. And then the punchline happened. About 2 months later, I received a letter from a woman who was a member of the Theosophical Society. And she had clairvoyant abilities, but she didn't lean into them. She didn't really want to exercise that. And I didn't know her very well. Tamara didn't know her very well. We never met her in person. We never had any extensive conversation with her. She said to me, I've been talking to Tamara for a couple of months, and I finally got up the courage to send you the notes. Please tell me, am I crazy or am I talking to Tamara? Well, there were many things in the notes that were direct hits. For example, I had left utensils that I used to use to prepare Tamara's morning coffee and her breakfast and stuff in the kitchen just because I couldn't bear to put them away. It was such a beautiful moment every morning. And so she was laughing about that to this person, that these things were still out, even though I don't drink coffee and I don't eat the things that she ate. But then there was a sentence in there that absolutely floored me, which was, tell Ronnie to tell tell Ronnie to tell Mildred that I love her. To begin with, to guess the name Mildred is astronomically, the odds are just ridiculous. But then the intent of the message, because I had been feeling regrets, and among the regrets I felt was that I'd ever become so neurotic with her that she had given me the nickname Mildred. And I just bitterly regretted that I'd given into that Hausfrau reflex. But here she was saying, no, I actually loved Mildred too, that she understood that I did that because of love. And it was so healing for me. And then the messages continued. And I received just about a week ago a list of 20 sentences that would seem to anybody who just read them at random like they didn't really mean much. I'm going to share just a couple of them, and then I'll wrap this up. So one of them was chocolate chip cookies. Well, this woman had no idea that every night, as soon as she finished her dinner, Tamara would have a cup of Earl Grey tea with a spoon of dark maple syrup, and she would eat Tate's chocolate chip cookies. And she would dip them into the tea. And this was a ritual I would prepare for her after every dinner, and it was something that was very dear to us. Another food-related one, Tamara was a Taurus, was just the word apples, which seems so innocuous. But this was another thing. Tamara loved Granny Smith apples. And I was also somebody who really looked for rare varieties of apples, like cathead apples or black Arkansas apples, trying to tempt her with them. And when I found one that she really loved, I'd give it to her every night until she'd come back and say, I want my Granny Smith apples again. So throughout our lives together, apples were this major theme. Another one was one word, hymns. The day before the last day of her life, Tamara had called me with a plan. She wanted me to bring a copy of this book we'd written together called The Magic of the Orphic Hymns. And she wanted me to sing them to her softly at her bedside in the hospital. And so I did, while holding her hand. And it was this beautiful moment. We had been doing those hymns, working on them for decades, and had magical experiences with them. Like the first time we ever did them, we did the hymn to Athena, and a great horned owl landed in the middle of the Hollywood Flats at noon on the nearest telephone pole and stayed just long enough to hear the hymn, and then flying away swooped right over us. So these hymns were like old friends, and we did not know that this was the last night of our lives together. But there we were doing the hymns, and there was this word on the list. And then finally, baby birds chirping. Well, the day before I received this communication, the day before it came through the woman who sent it to me, I had been working out, and I noticed that our new mockingbird in the garden had found a mate. We had just had a terrible storm with incredible winds, and I was hoping he was okay. And now there was like raindrops sparkling all over the garden, and he was dancing with this mate. It was like Astaire and Ginger Rogers. It was so cute. And I said out loud, Tamara, we're going to have baby birds. So I got the message back, baby birds chirping. Every single one of those 20 lines was that accurate. It was incredible. There was even one, in a warm bed beside you. This was amazing to me because every night I would try to get to bed before Tamara on cold nights, and I would get on her side of the bed to warm it up for her. And I loved hearing her say toasty as she would slide in between the sheets. And also, I had been seeing her next to me, like out of the corner of my eye, like she was sleeping there just for a few days in a row. And so here comes this message, in a warm bed beside you. And after that message, I stopped seeing her. So at first I thought it was a bereavement hallucination, but now I believe that she deliberately was letting me see her so that she could deliver this message. And as you can see from these messages, they often have double or triple meanings. There's these simple, a few words packed with personal experience. So I can only assume that she, I was shocked because Betty was trained. Betty spent 20 years with the Invisibles learning how to do this. Tamara didn't do that. She, in fact, resisted her clairvoyant ability. I remember, like in our band, once our engineer's mom died, and Tamara was in the kitchen, and she said to me, God, I wish this woman would stop bothering me. And I said, what? And she said, there's this woman here, and she's just bugging me. And it turned out to be his mom. And a message was delivered that was accurate. But Tamara didn't want to turn that on. She was a very practical Capricorn and very busy with her creativity. So she never exercised these things. She merely worked on the Betty book, on Unobstructed Way with me, and we must have read it 100 times as we put it together. And she certainly seems to have learned from just reading it. So I feel like we had a mission to continue the work of the Whites, and that's why they toasted her in particular. And I feel that part of that mission is that when you look at the Whites, you see this incredibly blessed life that they led. They were so wealthy, and they were able to spend 20 years learning this stuff. It's hard to take it to heart. But Tamara was a punk rocker. Tamara didn't get training, and Tamara did it anyway, which says that we can all do it, that this is our natural legacy, our heritage as human beings, to be able to communicate from beyond and to be able to receive when we're in the obstructed communications from the unobstructed. And Tamara's still demonstrating it. She pops up in dreams and in direct communications with people that she has mentored. She's encouraged films and books and helped people solve creative problems. And I'll tell you one last example of it just because it's funny, and Tamara was very funny. So I had a very hard time around December 22nd and Christmas and New Year's because her birthday was December 22nd. And she was one of those kids that didn't get Christmas presents. She either got birthday presents or Christmas presents, not both. So all our lives together, I spoiled her with the most amazing presents. I would spend months every year preparing these things. And so it was so awful to be alone for those days. And it not only made me grief-stricken, but it brought back some of my old anger. And I was feeling a lot of pain. On New Year's night, I dreamed of her. And I was sitting across from her, and there was nothing but light. And I said, do you see how much pain I'm in? And she said, yes, I'm watching you. And the show sucks. Well, I woke up laughing from that dream, and it changed how I approached life, and it lifted me. So that is, in a nutshell, a little bit about the Whites. There's so much more to their teaching, and I highly recommend it to anyone. And a little bit about my life with Tamara and how it reflected and in some ways continued the work of the Whites. And I'm happy to answer questions. I also have a YouTube channel under my name where there's a series of 10 or 11 videos that are a much more in-depth look at the Betty books.